pushing the envelope, really looking at prefabrication on a project we did here recently in Omaha, or in the process of finishing, 3 months away from finishing. So just a quick show of hands so we understand, any owner or owner's representatives in the room, design professionals, architects, engineers, contractors, like general contractors, trade partners, any subcontractors. Okay, how about general knowledge or experience, like with prefabrication? I'll just start with like really no prefabrication experience. Anybody? A little bit? A little bit? Say like a lot of prefab experience? Okay. All right. Cool. So I'm gonna be moving around and stuff. I try to talk about it anyways, but I'll be back here. You'll stop us with any questions that you have along the way. We're gonna get rolling. So my name is Matt Gosa. I'm part of our design integration group at Murphy out of St. Louis. On this project, I serve as that design integration role.
I'm Patrick McCurdy. I'm a partner in regional healthcare practice at Regulatory Healthcare. And on this job, my role was a project manager.
I'm Virgil Pope from Jersey Building Companies. I'm a PM for the construction side.
Brent Maher with Common Spirit Health, and I'm an area manager of planning, design, and construction.
All right. How are we doing, volume? Good? Everybody?
The guy's sitting down. The guy's sitting down. I'm farthest away.
Yeah.
They can be a little louder.
All right. Speak up. We will speak up.
Better?
Yeah.
Great. Yep.
All right. So we want to kind of start, this is going to be kind of a panel moderator type thing, but we're just going to kind of cruise through and just really have a conversation as the goal. So we wanted to start out not specifically about the project that we're talking about, but just in general prefabrication. So as we talk about prefabrication, it's something that, I think a lot of us know in some way, shape, or form. It's not necessarily a new thing. Maybe it's something that's gaining a lot of adoption here within the Midwest, but like a lot of things culturally, the Midwest is kind of like slow to adopt, like, yeah, we'll get there, they're doing that in California, like, yeah, okay. And I think a lot of projects are starting to see that more and more, so that adoption is not really widely there yet. And everybody kind of being familiar with it in general, you can talk about some high-level points of really the benefits for prefab. When you talk schedule, when you talk quality, you talk safety, cost, the minimization of waste. There's really a lot of opportunities that we're going to get into, not just on the project specifically that we're talking about, but the opportunity to find prefab opportunities on any project, any market, any location. So, as this ever-evolving process within commercial construction has continued to develop and technology is there, the delivery method of design build, really see a lot of opportunities, especially within healthcare, the number one place for prefabrication opportunity, and a labor shortage that I think all of construction is familiar with, right? The average age of construction workers is pushing up in the mid-40s now. There's a big gap there, right? So we need to figure out innovative ways to really level off resources, level off our production, and make it easier for us to build projects. So what we're going to go over today, really want to just understand in general prefabrication and how that can improve efficiency within healthcare construction specifically, and we want to get in more to some of the global side of prefab as well. What type of relevant prefab components are there on healthcare projects, and how does that decision-making process, the development, the refinement, what do we do, what do we not do, how does that go to really maximize the benefits? And then just look at some practical strategies, some lessons learned, some things to think about, maybe from a design or an owner or construction perspective, on how do we really mitigate these challenges like labor shortages and sustainability and speed to market piece. So, having said that, we're going to talk a little bit about Common Spirit Health. We're here from Common Spirit Health. We're going to look at the facility strategy, the need for the project, things like that. I want to talk about the development, the refinement of this prefab approach, what was done in design and what was done during construction, and then some of these outcomes and kind of top takeaways. So, Virgil, why don't you go ahead and kick us off, give us an intro to the job.
Yeah, so today we're going to be talking specifically about CHI Health Medical Center. This project's located a little bit to the north of Omaha, Nebraska, across the street from Common Spirit's main campus. It is a single-story building, steel structure, 40,500 square feet, and the makeup includes a pharmacy, imaging suite, and 64 exam rooms, with a total construction cost of $17 million. And as Matt said, we're close to the finish, so
So really want to kick us off. So Brent, if you could share a little bit about, CommonSpirit's need for the project and really just the organization's desire for consistent patient experiences, consistent staff experiences, things like that.
Yeah, you bet. As far as the need goes, part of our mission as an organization is to serve the poor and the vulnerable. So the location of this family health center really allows us to reach out to that population more than we currently do in Omaha. So this location is the second of its kind in the city. And then to address the standardization, the plan for our family health centers, we do have ambulatory design guidelines, which are effectively the basis of design for these projects. Which we released an update to the ambulatory design guidelines last year. Leading up to the release of that, which is a 24-month process, we had a multidisciplinary team put together, working through some lean principles, trying to develop what this design should look like going forward, focusing on increased efficiency, improving the patient experience really first and foremost. Along the way also improving quality, improving safety, really improving the provider's experience as well. So like I said, it's effectively the basis of design that we kind of hand over to the team to run with and mold as they see fit.
Yeah, so as we talk about the guidelines and kind of, for those that don't know, CommonSpirit is the second largest nonprofit healthcare organization in the country. So, Brent, the types of challenges that are encountered on a lot of projects nationally, but, for CommonSpirit, talk us through this a little bit as far as what you guys see from a design and construction perspective from kind of more of a macro level.
Yeah, it's really no different with us and our projects that we're seeing kind of all across the country with labor shortages. In addition to that, if material shortages or material availability is a problem from a procurement standpoint. So yeah, not a whole lot different. Really, needing to partner with innovative partners, design build teams to really tackle these problems and look at it from a different perspective to provide solutions to be able to deliver the project. So really that collaborative effort is critical to making this work. Really, I think the design build delivery method is really the avenue that's really conducive to tackle some of these issues. Can you tackle that a little bit?
Yeah, the design build approach really fosters a collaborative, innovative environment. It creates a culture where the team comes together and really works towards common goals to do what's best for the client, do what's best for the project. And that was really important to this team as we move forward with the design and really contribute to the success of our project.
Yeah, so, as we were pulling this presentation together, we kind of pulled an audible and we really wanted to stop for a second and just talk about the design process and really the people that become involved within, a project. And there's a lot to kind of unpack as we especially get into design build. You're putting personalities like a builder, which is very checklist, production, let's get stuff done, kind of focus, and we're scaling that back as you get to an architecture side, either design and whatnot that I think a lot of us are familiar with. And we're all really trained to think in different ways and how we can begin to pull a lot of this prefab discussion earlier into the process. We have to recognize that there's a lot of differences in the way that we do things as our roles, and that's a really important process, a really important thing to kind of unpack and just get under the hood a little bit, get to develop that trust, and it'll really lead to an effective process of just collaborating through, figuring out what we're going to do, and ultimately coming up with the best solution for the client, the best value add for the client. Patrick, anything you might add there?
I would just say, if you look at this and you see different ways that we work together, but we did really come together as one team, and really the ideation process throughout the design, we really work together in evaluating, testing, looking, and coming up with the best solutions for that.
Yeah, as we get into this, I think it's important to acknowledge, like, a lot of prefab can be done with, really kind of two separate, you've got the design, you've got the prefab, they can absolutely be done. I think some of the things that we did on this project really required that close-knit coordination early on in the process. So, jumping into that from the design side, just the development, the process that we went through. Patrick, you're going to talk us through a little bit, just that development of the design, studies that Paper Welker had to work through. Really, we're meeting those expectations as Brent alluded to on the guidelines and standards that are there, what type of innovative ways can we unpack this?
So the scene check guidelines were a great starting point, right? If you look at this plan, you see a lot of repetitive rooms, which is great. We had, on this project, 64 same-handed exam rooms, 26 identical provider offices as a start. As you see that in this plan, you really identify kind of where those repetitive rooms are. So that means doors, outlets, plumbing, casework on those exam rooms, all the exact location. So that was a plus. In addition, we drew from our experience doing prefab and modular in both I and B occupancy, and recognized a real advantage with this project being B occupancy, and the fact that it really reduces the amount of fire and smoke partitions, as you know, which occur in high occupancy. That was a plus also. And then as we look at the most relevant prefab components for this project, you know, the systems that we utilized, they evolved over time. But what we ended up looking at and ended up using was prefab under slab plumbing systems. So, you know, trenches were dug and all that was done off site. And if you were, and I was there the day a lot of this was being done, very minimal amount of stuff that came on site, a few people going into the trenches, assembling it, not all the scrap to waste, all the people, all the cars, all the traffic. It was pretty amazing to watch how simple it was. We utilized exterior backup wall systems. So that's stud, sheathing, air, and water barrier. Did not include exterior materials. And there's a reason behind that. So looking at the guidelines for Common Spirit and the brand, they had masonry and metal panels as part of that branding. There was some flexibility as far as what that masonry might be, how it ties into the campus, on the metal panels. When you look at that from a weight standpoint, it just wasn't viable to put and ship. In addition to the metal panels, when we looked at the main campus and what they had on theirs, we wanted to be a relative to them in design. What we ended up with was a larger panel size that also just wasn't appropriate for the panel sizes that we needed to ship. So we really focused in on drawing in the building so that we could accelerate the TI portion of the project as quickly as possible and apply those finishes after the fact. We also used overhead mechanical systems, which is great. So you think about no walls really in the facility yet. They're all being manufactured. And a mechanical just comes in with a big fly zone, nothing in the way. It just goes to town, putting all those systems in, and racks in. And then the interior walls, they were prefab and brought out on site. And they included electrical and plumbing rough-ins. But I want to kind of step back on the plumbing side of it because we did mock-ups at the shop, which was actually Fowler's manufacturing plant. And the trade partners came out there. You know, again, it's evolving. It's always lessons learned, always talking and fine-tuning. And so the plumbing contractors said, you know, it'd be better, now that we've got all of our plumbing components in the mock-up, it'd be better for us to take those and bring them to our manufacturing plant, mass produce those, and then bring them out to the site and install them. And the reason for that was it was a labor savings for them and it cleaned up their process. So they can go out and put them in once the panels are all put in place with the interior walls. They come in and plug and play. But then with the staff there, they have to connect at that time. They do it all at the same time to the underground and to the vent stacks. So that was really good for them in that process. And then also just recognizing the prefab system evolved over time. You know, we began exploring the interior partitions actually using flat pack systems. Have they heard of flat pack? So flat pack is think IKEA, right? So instead of having everything done in the shop and actually assembled on a table on top of those panels being moved, it's all, you're still getting all the benefits from the manufacturing plant, the shop, and all those savings, but it's being shipped as a kit of parts like IKEA might for each exam room, and then it's just assembled. So you don't eliminate all that waste, all that savings, all that cost reduction, but you're still getting a lot of value.
Yeah, so it is good to highlight, just because you can, doesn't mean you should, right? Prefabrication, so you gotta continually look at your benefits. If it's not benefiting the project in one of those ways, or you're not maximizing it, you really need to step back and say, hey, am I just falling in love with this idea, or does it actually make sense for this project?
Yes, I mean, as we look at this project and the opportunities that are really, began to talk to the patient rooms, provider offices, a lot of these repeatable spaces, the team thinking through that early on and finding those opportunities. We're going to get into a little bit how do we reduce some full height walls, what we need to do to make sure we're maintaining privacy between rooms, things like that. We really start to get into like how are we actually going to execute it. And, Virgil, I want to kick it to you. When did prefab, these discussions kind of start, and how did that development go from the McCarthy perspective?
Yeah, really prefabrication started with the pursuit of this project. For us, it was identifying a better approach and more innovative way for clinics. Clinics are a big sector of the healthcare market and will be in the foreseeable future, whether it be Common Spirit or others. So really starting this out, especially with the right partners, you have to have 100% buy-in from your partners. And I think there's a lot of rub up front, and if you go back to like a CMR or traditional approach, it can be a little more friction if everyone's not bought in, because, hey, we've done it this way, we've always done it this way, this is the easy way. You gotta wipe that slate clean. Everyone needs to come with ideas, and the best idea wins, right? It's putting our ego aside and moving forward with the best outcome for the project. And this project is relatively small, but this is scalable on larger projects for sure. So moving forward with that. And the unique thing about this project is we didn't dictate prefabrication to our trade partners during buyout. What we did is we went out to our partners and said, hey, we put a ton of effort into this project with design. We really feel that this is going to, knock it out of the park with prefabrication. We just kind of got them excited. What ultimately happened is the ones that really embraced prefabrication, those are the ones that actually were the low, qualified bidder and won the job. So seeing us spend a lot of time up front on prefabrication, then having the market dictate those that embraced it were the cheaper option, most qualified option to save money to our owners and clients was a huge deal, right? Not only that, but once we had them on board, they were coming to us with ideas and pitching, hey, we can do X, Y, Z, we can do it this way, we can do it that way. And really, that team, that 100% buy-in from trade partners, designers, architects, and owners, just tremendous success.
Did you have a single warehouse for these activities?
Yep.
One, and two, is any multi-trade going on in any warehouse?
Yeah, so the electrical contractor and then carpenters for blocking and backing all went to the warehouse where the stuff were being fabricated and erected or produced.
And the original thought was plumbing would too, that we solve this cleaner or better for them to do their own shop. But the original intent was it needed to.
Is everybody union?
No, that is one thing that we'll get, you jumped the gun on the presentation, but definitely, not only the unions and your geographic location is a big deal, obviously, but also jurisdiction as well. You need to make sure that your HGAs are on board with your plan to build up front. So, great question. Omaha's a little more relaxed than Kansas City on the union. So we had a non-union electrician and a union drywall and framer, and a union carpenter.
Yeah, I think a lot of that really speaks to, Virgil said a couple times, the team, it's a team effort that really pulls a lot of this earlier in the process and allows us to gain as much efficiency as possible. Puts a lot of people to work together that aren't used to being there, whether it's a union or non-union thing, or it's the architects working closer with us, the builders and the owner involvement we're going to kind of get into. But I think the big thing is, prefab is not just going to happen, right? It takes the right team, the capabilities, the planning, that trade partner feedback, all of that is so critical to really successfully executing this. And I think you ultimately right people in the right seat on the bus, right? Yeah.
So when you mentioned the HJ, what type of communication do you guys have with them beforehand?
Yeah, we actually met with the building inspector and then all the electrical and plumbing inspectors as well prior to doing the prefabrication to make sure that was something they were comfortable with buying with. If you one side for the exterior walls, for instance, when you saw the previous slide, we one-sided that exterior sheathing, air and weather barrier. The inspector was fine as long as he could seal the screws from the backside. So we also opened it up for them to go out to the shop as well. Also had a lot of manufacturers, reps go out. So they're weather barrier, for instance, we use the Tremco product. They were out, it seemed like every other week to verify panel detailing appropriate. And then they also did a final on the overall job on site once we had everything went up.
You know, a big piece, right, like doing all this prefab, 64 patient rooms, all these provider offices, and we've got a big, code compliance issue or just a concern from an inspector, right, that it almost doesn't matter what code says at that point, right? The inspector flagged it, we've got to have that buy-in. Had a question there?
Yeah, on the exterior sheet, the lady in the chief of the office, which
If you reference that lower left picture, there are strategic gaps in our panels, so that way we can infill them in the field, whether that be, structural issue, but also if you think you have a 300-foot run and all your panels are screwed together, there could be issues with your tolerances, and I'll dive into that.
Yeah, so first of all, we got this up and up for a second, so I'm sure everybody's been taking it in, but just run us through a couple of these higher points here.
Yeah, so as you can see on the screen, the numbers, I believe they're pretty impressive. The thing that goes along with that is time. So the 121 exterior wall panels, so that's studs, sheathing, air weather barrier. All those were set in 5 days. We started roofing this project 14 days after our first panel was set. So we experienced just a 60% increase on the, one of the biggest milestones in construction is building enclosure. So with able to do that was just tremendous for this project. Over 75% of the interior walls were prefabricated. That includes the electrical, low voltage, blocking and backing. And you really got to step back in prefabrication and think about all the benefits. So, yeah, you could probably say, framing. You could probably be pretty close to that stick framing, but that's not the overall benefit. The benefit is taking critical path activities on a construction schedule and doing them prior to needing them on site. So while we were doing steel and slab on grade and underground, we were framing these panels and roughing them in off-site. So what that allowed us to do is accelerate from framing to drywall, which is also on your critical path, right? And there's a huge labor shortage. So what that does is lowers peaks and valleys of required craft on site during that. But then those critical path activities that are done up front, then they move and accelerate your schedule of actually installing in the field. Which I think I said this already was a 30% increase from framing to drywall. Then on top of that, think of your overhead MEPs. Always a headache with top out, going back, making sure we're right. Super important. What this allowed us to do, it didn't eliminate all the top, full height walls, but what it allowed us to do is accelerate the overhead MEP. I mean, this was a dream job for any MEP because barely any walls in their way, and they could just fly through an empty floor. So what that looked like, just for reference, our sprinkler fitter anticipated 7 weeks of installation. They did it in 3. Everyone's happy, everyone's efficient, everyone's moving forward.
You talk about BIM.
Yeah.
Was BIM a big part of this?
Huge part of this. So, Hafer Walker McCarthy really got the model to a really good position. And once those contractors were brought on board, we did BIM coordination through this and really just fine-tune all the overhead MEP. The beauty about prefabricated walls is you know exactly where every stud is. Think through that a step further on the facility side. Brent's facility manager in the future, hey, I got a question, where's XYZ in the wall? Well, we know exactly where everything is in the wall, right? But I do think, and a good point on the VDC and BIM side of things, as our industry embraces it, because, you know, I feel like we're there, but also these smaller outfits are embracing it as well. It really allows education to do a next step further, especially in the Midwest, as BIM starts and continues to grow.
Yeah, I think as we look at, you know, a couple of these, some are probably more familiar than others, you know, that the amount of interior wall panelization that's done wall panel from a drying perspective, the ease of installation for overhead MEP, because the interior walls are all prefab, those came in later, and it just makes the process that much more efficient. But I think, to go back, and we said it earlier, you can't prefab everything, and even if you could, you shouldn't. You know, the finish on the building was big aesthetic. You know, there was a lot of prominence to the aesthetic look of the building as a tie to the building across the street. So, you know, not putting a finish on made good sense for us. Not putting plumbing in the wall, as we talked about, made good sense. Not one side of the drywall because it'd be too heavy. You know, let's take it to that right sweet spot. And stick build, infill, you can make a lot happen. Obviously, the field, the way it's been done for a long time, but you're gaining a massive amount of efficiency there. So we'll keep cruising. So Brian, we're pulling back in. You know, we talked about prefab from an owner's perspective. We've got the guidelines, but you know, from that owner's perspective, what types of challenges come to mind for you with your own users, your own folks that are going to be involved in the project?
Yeah, I know Virgil mentioned getting your AHJ on board early. I think also, from my standpoint, making sure that end users are comfortable with where everything is going to be installed, where the roughnecks are located, with these panels, where your backing is, your devices are in appropriate locations. I know one thing that was done here is when the full mock-up was built of the room out at the fab shop, the team brought our end users out to walk through it, make sure that everything was where it needed to be before these panels went into production. So that's a real critical piece to this whole process.
Yeah, so from our perspective, the design professionals and contractors in the room, you know, us needing that support right from the owner of being in a good spot when we go to start prefabrication. Because if we don't do a mock-up, if we don't have that right buy-in, then we come out and we find that the first exam room that goes in, you know, some outlets are in the wrong place. We've got 64 rooms already prefab, right? It's just huge. That owner involvement is huge. And so, Patrick, from a design perspective, talk us through some of those challenges on the project and how we kind of work through those.
Sure. So, I mean, I'm going to say it again, the guidelines set us up pretty well to start with. However, there were some items that we wanted to explore with common spirit. Talk about modifying without sacrificing the intent of their guidelines and what they were there for. So, the majority of their walls, they had a lot of walls that were going full height, underside of deck. All their exam rooms, their writer offices, and some other walls, which isn't ideal for prefab, right? Because now you're in the way of all the mechanical systems that want to run in that no-fly zone, or let's just say it was a clear-fly zone at the right time. And then sealing those up with those three-wall penetrations all along the deck, all that complexity that's cost, labor, and everything else. In addition, as they were looking at noise transmission and STC ratings, their partitions for their exam rooms had 2 layers of drywall on one side, 1 layer at the other. So as we talked through these things, we sat down and said, okay, what can we do? We can get these down to 6 inches, and also from a cost standpoint, just remove that layer of drywall. We could do other things. So one of those was noise cancellation. The project and the guidelines already had that in there. So it was basically seen as we modified this, where do those really need to be? We also looked at balancing out costs and saying, okay, we can reduce that cost, change those walls. What if we looked at the CAC ratings on the ceiling tiles within the ceiling system? So we were able to increase that to help. And then also putting in the right sound damper return air ducts, right, at the 90-degree angle. So just looking through all those things to make sure we thought it all through, again, working collaboratively through all that. We also looked at column locations. 90-95% of the columns from the template laid out pretty well. But there was a few that we modified on the interior as well as the exterior perimeter, just to better align with the way columns hit those, or prefab panels hit those, just to have more repetition and consistency in the prefab condition.
Patrick, you want to talk about the occupancy? Touch on that. I forgot. The occupancy of the building.
I did not.
Well, that also was a big help as well, versus type B versus type I, right?
Oh, I did talk about that earlier. I did touch base on that.
Yeah, so before that, the building not being licensed doesn't mean you want to sacrifice, the expectations of FGI and the privacy, the HIPAA concerns between rooms, right? So that, changing that wall type, changing the top out down to a reduced height, and putting in a higher CAC ceiling still allows you to hit those SDC ratings that FGI requires. That's a lot of acronyms. I'm impressed that I didn't screw that up. Yeah. So, from a construction side, and something I think that plays into both, and I'm pulling an audible here. So the important piece here with prefab for sure is the cost benefit that comes with it. And in not all cases does doing prefab ultimately mean it's going to be cheaper. So, the involvement that this team had with our pre-con director in our office in Omaha, running cost models, running just ROMs on different ideas, is it ultimately going to be more efficient to build it off-site and then have to add trucking to it, or is it more efficient to be built on-site? That cost component obviously is huge, but it's something that has to be, working through this process so we don't get down a path and ultimately drive cost into the project by doing this. So with that, just Virgil, from the construction side, proactively addressing these challenges that we knew were going to be out there. Let's talk about that a little bit.
Yeah, I think really, whatever the plan becomes in design, you just have to make sure that it's come out from fabrication through installation, right? So, you want to think through that before you're committed too far. We briefly talked about it earlier, but weight was a big concern. So, whatever component you're fabricating off-site, you need to have a good plan from how are you going to load trucks, transportation routes, deliveries, how am I going to offload that on the site, and how am I going to get it into the building? Does that sequence well? Do we have a plan in place with exterior enclosure to allow those larger pieces to come in? And also just maneuverability. How are these getting installed in place on the construction site? Patrick hit on it earlier, but originally we thought in-wall plumbing along with it. Then we thought, hey, maybe one-sided, maybe we device, maybe X, Y, Z, right? When it came down to it, our panels were in the sweet spot that two craft personnel could basically maneuver these panels. Had we gone or added anything else, they get too heavy. So then if you look at your benefits, you got to realize outweighing, hey, do we need to come up with some special piece of equipment to set these? No, really to maximize benefit, you just want craft professionals to do it. So for us at least. So really thinking through that. And then the biggest thing is identifying tolerances and exposure limits of the material you use. So two examples on our project was we had strip windows in the exterior. Well, to carry the masonry above it, they had to have structural support. So part of that was HSS 6x6, right? Tube steel in the wall. Well, our issue was our framing is 6 inches as well. So the tolerances between our perimeter concrete curb, the steel, the wall panels had to be perfect. Luckily, we got by, but noticing that, like, you need to think about the tolerances. I mean, steel alone can be, an eighth of an inch, whatever, 16 feet. But it's a huge idea of making sure your tolerances can fit within your prefabrication model. The other one is the exposure limit I touched on. So when you think about exterior walls, big thing in construction, exposure on your air and weather barrier. So knowing that our panels would be prefabricated months in advance when they were needed on site, we need to think about exposure limits. Typical air and weather exposure for fluid applied is 6 months. The sheet good we switched to has a 12-month exposure limit, which allowed us to fabricate them earlier, bring them out on site, store them until we're ready to set. And then, obviously, you're going to finish systems, ours with masonry and metal panel.
Yeah. So finding that sweet spot again, right? It's not everything, it's not nothing. But that sweet spot and how we go about working through the construction process, big piece of that. So from a sustainability side, Virgil, we talk a lot about just the wastefulness within construction. It's like the #1 industry for landfill, adding to landfills, right? So between that and Patrick, we just want to talk a little bit about the sustainability side and the benefits from the prefabrication, putting that into these projects. So Patrick, why don't you start?
Okay. I'm going to start based on minimizing waste, right? So again, you've seen the process we've been talking about. So they take our drawings that we've developed as a team, and they do shot drawings of every single panel. And so they're rolling their actual studs. I've actually seen some plants actually go even stamp on those studs that say conduit goes here, plumbing goes there. But in this case, the main point I'm making is that they stamp their own studs. So not really laying out to think about waste size, minimizing scrap, but then they're stamping to very precise. So if you look at on the that's the scrap types of pieces you get versus when you go out to the job site, you see big pieces of studs laying off the side and waste containers and all that being shipped off. So that is a big plus in minimizing waste, going to the landfills, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, really, I want to jump to that, you know, that in-shop, you know, the ability to reduce the waste, I mean, that's improving the quality side as well, right? We kind of specifically said it, right, but it's always said to be inside that facility.
Yes.
And the ability to work at tabletop, height, ergonomics, you know, there's so much benefit there, right, for the folks that are doing that, and the ability to keep ahead of critical path. So, sorry, Bruce, go ahead.
No, great stuff. I mean, we were talking earlier, one of the biggest compliments as far as the GC side goes is that if someone walks your site and says, wow, this is a clean site, right? That's, to me, it's one of the biggest compliments. I think prefabrication definitely lends itself. You don't have to cut off the debris, the scraps. You know, the way I envision it is, you know, the professionals in the room that go to the office every day. If you were to walk in your main door and someone had tipped over the trash can and just let it scatter across the floor, and then everyone just proceeded to walk over it, if you don't control that on the job site, you know, no one says anything. In an office, everyone says anything, right? So taking that into account on the prefabrication side, minimizing scrap, minimizing waste, minimizing the amount of material being brought out on site that isn't part of the building is huge, not only on the quality and safety side of things of your site. We don't really touch about it a whole lot in this presentation, but also take into account a job site is inherently dangerous, ever-changing conditions. To Matt's point, 70 and sunny in a warehouse, everyone has, you know, the conditions are controlled. So alleviating that hazard from our job sites and minimizing the amount of man hours on site is big news.
Do you have a metric on how many craftspeople you took off that site on prefab?
After this, I'm going to, that's a great idea to do. We haven't calculated the craft on site versus at the warehouse, but we should, absolutely. I can tell you this though, just thinking through the exterior, we would have anticipated, you know, to hit anywhere near our dates, probably, you know, 15 to 20 individuals on different activities. The exterior panels are set with a two-man crew. So,
I worked for a mechanical contractor for a long time, U.S. Engineering, and they had a
Yeah.
hospital in Denver, and they calculated how many ladder steps they didn't have to take.
that's great.
Because it was all of this prefab, 66,000.
We were together at a job training.
Yeah.
Did you guys see any LEED certification on this?
It was not. I mean, it goes way deeper into sustainability. I actually have a shoulder tap running along, which is great. I appreciate the questions. But, you know, you talk about carbon footprint and less people driving and all the other stuff that can play in this, right? I mean, just the benefits can go on and on, but we do not have that much time. So, Virgil, getting to you, some data here.
Yeah, I mean, starting to calculate everything, just on the design approach side of things, just material-wise that you can quantify is over $1 billion. It's what we ended up coming up with. You know, close to 10 weeks of, you know, time on the field to improve our ever-growing or accelerating schedules. More than, you know, $500,000 can be easily calculated with just trade partners from traditional prefab, including material. And ultimately, I talk about increased revenue and other avenues. That number could grow to $1 million even on a $17 million job. That's obviously speed to market. It's important. This location is an impoverished location in Omaha, and I think getting your community being served by your project is obviously important.
Well, the speed to market isn't just the revenue you're creating, right, earlier, it's also that revenue goes back. There are nonprofits, the ability to get that revenue earlier, reinvest it, do more for the community, do more throughout their system. But it's also capturing additional market share earlier before anybody else might be doing something yet. So that was really important, and I don't think we have a dollar value on that yet, but yet add to the total. Did you mention that overall was like a $17 million project? I might be thinking myself here, but it was, we're talking $1 million savings. That's a big savings of $17 million, and it's added back value back to the client.
Yeah, it's a good steward to our clients' money, as Brad said earlier, the ability to really support their mission and give them more opportunity to get more programmatic space, more patient-facing spaces with their money. That budget is huge. All right, so coming into the end, just want some final thoughts, takeaways. So, Brian, start with you.
Yeah, really, from the owner's perspective, if your design build team's coming to you and says, you get an opportunity to save 5% or 5% of the project cost and get you your doors open sooner, we go down this route while not sacrificing quality in the process. Absolutely. That's, you'd be missing a huge opportunity to not at least explore the option. So appreciate it, everybody's work up to this point, from the team to get us to this point to deliver this project.
Yeah, from our practices yesterday, right? The looking at this on every project, right? It's like, how you got to do that as an organization at this point.
Well,
it's big.
You're missing out.
Yep. So,
Well, and I would say, set yourself up for success. Look at your team, build that culture that just continually collaboration and innovation happens. Don't be afraid to explore options. Don't say we've never done that or that's not the way we do it. Always be open to new ideas, working together. But building that relationship is really important. That trust, that honesty, that accountability, and all working towards that common goal.
Yeah, I think for me, I mean, with the market the way it is currently and the areas we have to deal with, labor shortages, material lead times, accelerated schedules, you're doing yourself a disservice if you don't look into prefabrication. We do need to come up with innovative ways to keep setting that bar higher and higher. And this is definitely one of those avenues that should be, to Matt's point, looked at on each job. There can be some kind of component that would be beneficial. It's not a one-size-fits-all approach, but definitely there are so many avenues to ensure you're doing something to be more efficient on the job site.
yeah, find the right job, find the right stuff to go after. The industry, the market will absolutely support it and find the efficiencies. And some things that I wanted to kind of close with. We didn't talk much about it, but it was done on this project. Even just recutting hangers, U.S. engineering reminded me of this, like MEP hangers, cutting all thread. How many times we walk around a job and you do one of those, like, hit your all thread, you almost lose your foot in there, just cutting down on that. But I mean, the other stuff that we didn't talk about because it wasn't part of this project, but things that are happening out there, right? Looking at, prepping of sleeves, prepping of, rebar, retying rebar columns. Those are all things that are definitely prefabrication. You're pulling man hours off the job site where we probably don't have enough laydown, we probably don't have enough up time, yada, 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 right? The pre-tying, the rebar, the sleeves, you look at bathroom pods is a thing that's becoming bigger in healthcare construction, right? Unpacking and prepping light kits, within an electrician's shop, shipping out baskets full of light fixtures that are tagged and ready for them to be set out in each room by an apprentice. That's just very clear, very efficient, less trash on the job site. You start to look at like mass scale conduit racks, big duct banks that can be prefabricated as well. From gear to gear, the underground, just being able to build that in your shop, the unistrut frame, set it in place, ready to roll. Big pipe risers, we had a project in St. Louis that we did 4 floors worth of pipe risers as the concrete frame is coming up using the tower crane. I think the efficiency that comes from doing that in the inefficient way of chain falling 20-foot sticks of pipe, trying to fit it all up. You got a torsionist welder trying to figure out how to do it inside this concrete shaft. There's opportunities on every project from $1 million to $1 billion, and those data points become proportional as you start to apply these things. It's a big differentiator for the industry. So, with that, just kind of ended with what we talked about. I think we hope we got this out to you. Really looking at how do we improve efficiency within healthcare construction and how we really took finding those prefab components for our project and kind of talking through that decision-making process. How do we get the max benefit there? And then just looking at some practical takeaways, right? Strategies, how are we implementing all these different ways of doing things to really, counteract some of these industry challenges like labor shortages, safety, sustainability.